It was a quiet Sunday morning when the first hint of fear entered the small, sunlit bedroom at the edge of town. A 6-year-old boy named Evan had always loved the soft comfort of his blue blanket. It was his shield, his hiding place, his little world of safety when things outside felt too big. That morning, however, the comfort it gave him was different. There was something unfamiliar in the air. A storm was coming, not the kind that rattled windows, but the kind that stirred emotions he didn't understand. The world outside the window was grey and restless, the sound of thunder faint in the distance. Inside, the air was heavy with the echo of his parents' voices from the other room. Their tones, sharp and cracking like lightning, made his small hands clutch the blanket tighter. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the feeling, the tremor of sadness that crept into every corner of the house. Evan pulled the blanket over his head and curled into a ball, trying to block out the sound, the fear, the confusion. His breathing grew shallow as he pressed his face against the pillow, willing himself to disappear beneath the folds of fabric. Under the soft cotton darkness, his imagination began to swirl. He imagined monsters outside his blanket, not real ones, but those born from the tension he didn't yet know how to name. The only thing that broke through his fear was the sound of gentle footsteps and a soft thud against the floorboards. His dog, Max, had entered the room. The golden retriever, loyal and intuitive, seemed to sense the storm inside the boy's heart before it even fully formed. Max climbed onto the bed without hesitation, circling once before settling beside the trembling lump under the blanket. Evan didn't see him at first, but he felt it, the warm breath against his hand, the weight pressing gently against his legs, and the familiar scent of safety. Slowly, a small hand emerged from under the blanket and rested on the dog's head. Max didn't move. He simply waited, breathing slow and steady, his heartbeat calm enough for the boy to match. In that moment, the room shifted. The chaos outside seemed to fade, as if absorbed by the quiet strength of a creature who needed no words to comfort. The thunder rolled again, louder this time, and Evan flinched. But Max pressed closer, his fur brushing against the boy's arm, his eyes half closed, his loyalty unmoving. The boy whispered something only in his heart, a plea for the world to stop being so loud, for the feelings to make sense. Max seemed to hear it. He moved his paw slightly, resting it over the boy's chest as if to say, "You're safe now." The weight of that paw became an anchor. The rhythm of his breathing became a lullaby. Slowly, the fear began to soften. Outside, rain began to fall, slow, gentle, rhythmic. Inside, the blanket world became a fortress of love. Time passed in silence. When the door creaked open slightly, Evan's mother peeked in, her face lined with exhaustion. She saw only the shape of her son under the blanket and the loyal dog lying beside him. For a moment, guilt washed over her. Guilt for the raised voices, for the storm her son shouldn't have to hear. But when she saw the way Max stayed pressed to the boy's side, she let the door close again, trusting that love had found a way to hold him until things were better. Hours turned into days. And though the fights eventually quieted, the boy's fear lingered. He began hiding under the blanket more often, not always from storms, but from the uncertainty of growing up in a world that sometimes felt unstable. Max was always there. Every time Evan retreated into that cotton cocoon, Max followed, curling up beside him as if guarding a secret only they shared. Some nights, Evan would wake up from a nightmare, sweat damp on his forehead, tears streaking his cheeks. and though there were no words exchanged, the sound of Max's steady breathing was enough to calm him back to sleep. There was one afternoon when things changed. Evan had been home alone for a short while. His parents delayed, the sky once again heavy with rain. He was sitting on his bed, his blanket wrapped around him, reading one of his picture books when a loud crash came from outside. His small body froze. He ran to the window and saw the tree in the yard shaking violently in the wind. The thunder roared, and something about the movement outside sent a jolt of panic through him. He dropped the book, ran to his bed, and hid under the blanket once more. But this time, the fear wasn't about noise or shadows. It was about being alone. The house felt too big, the wind too loud, the world too uncertain. Max had been sleeping in the corner of the room. He stirred instantly when he heard the boy's breathing quicken under the blanket. With instinct older than reason, Max jumped onto the bed, pressing his body against the small shape hiding beneath. But Evan was shaking, too scared to come out. That's when something remarkable happened. Max began to move the blanket gently with his nose, nudging at it until a small gap formed. His snout found Evan's hand and nudged it again, insistently. Evan hesitated, then touched his dog's fur. That touch became a bridge. Max let out a low, comforting whine and then laid his head on the boy's stomach, his eyes watching the storm outside through the dim window light. Something shifted inside Evan. The trembling stopped. The rhythm of Max's heartbeat pulsed against him, strong, sure, alive. The boy's tears slowed, his breath steadied. He peeked out from under the blanket, just enough to see Max's calm face. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel powerless. He felt protected. The storm outside still raged, but it no longer mattered. What mattered was the warmth pressed against his side and the silent message the dog seemed to whisper through his. Steady presence that love could still exist, even when everything else felt uncertain. That night, when his parents came home, they found the two asleep together. Evan under his blanket, Max curled protectively around him. The window was still streaked with rain, but the air felt peaceful. The father stood in the doorway for a long time, watching. He realized then that the dog had done something neither he nor his wife had managed to do in weeks. Make their son feel safe again. The blanket, once a symbol of fear, had become something else entirely. It was no longer just a hiding place. It was a shared space of trust, a quiet cocoon where a small boy and his loyal dog found refuge from the chaos of the world. And though Evan never said it aloud, he began to believe something quietly profound, that sometimes the smallest creatures carry the biggest hearts, and that love doesn't always need to speak to be understood. Weeks turned into months, and the bond between Evan and Max grew deeper than anyone could have predicted. It was as if the boy and the dog shared an unspoken understanding of each other's hearts. Wherever Evan went, Max followed to the garden, to the porch, even to the edge of the school gate every morning. The dog would sit there, waiting patiently until the little boy vanished inside. And then he'd return home to wait again until afternoon. Their connection became the quiet rhythm of their days, a pattern that gave Evan a sense of safety in a world that often felt unpredictable. The storms stopped coming as often, but inside Evan, the shadows of fear still lingered. He still carried the habit of hiding when things felt too big, when he heard raised voices, when he felt alone, when the world seemed too loud. But each time, Max was there, reminding him with a single look or a quiet nudge that he was never really alone. There was one night that stood out more than any other, a night that began like any other, with the hum of the television in the other room and the soft rustle of wind against the window. But that night would change everything. It was late when Evan woke up. The air felt heavy, thick with something he couldn't name. He sat up, confused, calling softly for Max, but the dog didn't stir. Panic flickered in his small chest as he climbed out of bed and tiptoed through the dark house. Max was lying near the back door, his breathing uneven, his chest rising and falling too quickly. The boy didn't understand what was happening, only that something was wrong. He knelt beside his friend, placing a trembling hand on his fur. Max opened his eyes and met his gaze, and in that instant, something inside Evan broke open. It was as if the dog was trying to say goodbye without words. The next few hours blurred together in a fog of fear and helplessness. His parents rushed Max to the vet, and Evan sat in the back seat, holding onto his dog's paw as tightly as his small hands could manage. The rain began to fall again, light and persistent, streaking the car windows with silver. It felt like the world itself was crying with him. The vet spoke softly, words Evan couldn't fully understand. Infection, complications, too much pain, but he understood enough. He understood the look in his parents' eyes when they turned toward him, the way his father's jaw tightened and his mother's voice trembled. That night, Max didn't come home. The house felt impossibly empty, the silence echoing through every corner. Evan went straight to his room, dragging his blue blanket off the bed and wrapping himself in it like armor. He lay on the floor beside the door, waiting, half expecting to hear the soft click of paws against the floorboards. But there was nothing, just the quiet and the sound of rain. For days, Evan barely spoke. The world felt grey again, hollowed out. The blanket that had once brought him comfort now felt too heavy, as if it carried the weight of everything he had lost. His parents tried to reach him, but there was a distance they couldn't cross. He would sit by the window, watching the yard where Max used to chase butterflies, where they used to nap together under the sun. Sometimes, when the wind rustled the trees just right, he could almost hear Max's bark in the distance, faint, carried through memory. One morning, Evan woke to the sound of scratching, faint, soft, coming from outside his window. His heart leaped. For a moment, he thought it couldn't be real. He rushed to the window, pressing his palms against the cold glass. There was nothing there, just the morning fog clinging to the grass. But as he turned away, his eyes caught something on the porch, the old worn-out collar Max used to wear. His father must have placed it there without saying a word, but to Evan, it felt like a sign. He picked it up, held it close, and for the first time in days, he cried, not the scared, helpless kind of crying, but the kind that comes when love overflows. It was that same day that everything began to change. His parents, seeing how much the loss had hollowed their son, decided to take him somewhere new, to a quiet farm outside the city, a place where animals roamed freely and children could learn to care for them. Evan didn't want to go at first. The idea of meeting another dog felt like a betrayal. But when they arrived, something unexpected happened. The air at the farm smelled of hay and fresh grass, the sound of birds echoing through the open fields. As they walked along the fences, Evan noticed a small pen at the far end where a litter of puppies played. They were clumsy and joyful, tumbling over each other in pure innocence. One of them, smaller than the rest, sat apart, quiet, watching. Its fur was golden, though a little lighter than Max's, and its eyes carried the same deep gentleness. Evan stopped walking. The puppy tilted its head, then stood and slowly padded toward him, tail wagging softly. When their eyes met, something in the boy's chest loosened. He knelt, and the puppy pressed its nose against his hand, just like Max used to. That simple gesture broke through the grief that had held him for so long. The boy smiled through his tears, the first real smile in weeks. He didn't speak, he didn't need to. The world had given him a reminder that love doesn't end when someone leaves. It changes shape, it finds its way back to you in another form. That night, when they brought the puppy home, Evan didn't hide under the blanket anymore. Instead, he laid it out beside his bed and placed the puppy gently on top of it. The little dog curled up immediately, sighing softly as it fell asleep. Evan watched for a long time, his hand resting on its back, feeling the rise and fall of its breathing. It was a rhythm he recognized, steady, safe, alive. He didn't feel like he was replacing Max. He felt like Max had sent this little soul to find him, to teach him that love, when real, never truly leaves. The seasons shifted and the boy grew. He still kept the old blanket, though it was worn thin at the edges. Some nights, he'd drape it over both himself and his new dog, whispering silent promises into the folds, promises to never forget, to always love, to always be kind. As the years passed, the story of the boy who once hid under the blanket became a quiet family memory. But inside his heart, the lesson remained clear. Sometimes the smallest acts, a paw on a chest, a gentle nudge, a shared breath, can heal wounds deeper than words ever could. And so, years later, when Evan stood as a grown man in front of a crowd at a small animal shelter, volunteering his weekends to care for abandoned dogs, he carried that truth within him. He never mentioned Max by name, but everyone could feel it in the way he moved, the way he knelt down to greet each frightened animal, the way he smiled when a dog pressed against him for comfort. It was as if a piece of that childhood blanket still wrapped around him, invisible but ever present, the proof of a love that had once saved him as the sun set behind him. Painting the sky in soft gold, Evan looked out over the field where a dozen dogs played. Among them was his newest companion, running, leaping, alive with joy. He felt a soft breeze brush his cheek, carrying the faint scent of rain, and for a moment he closed his eyes. In that quiet second, he could almost feel the warmth of Max beside him again, the gentle heartbeat, the calm strength, the silent promise that love never dies. It only transforms. He smiled, knowing the truth he had carried since that day under the blanket. Sometimes, the things that save us don't speak. They just stay. And that, more than anything, is the kind of love that changes everything. If you've ever felt the quiet power of love like that, the kind that reaches beyond words, you'll understand what Evan learned. Sometimes the most beautiful moments in life begin with something small, something pure, something as simple as a boy hiding under a blanket and a dog deciding to stay.